Hello and welcome to the Dan Cave, and welcome to part 5 of the video build series of the Great Wall Hobbies 144th scale Handley Page Victor. In this part, and this part is going to be the final part, we go from the painted aircraft to add the decals, add a clear coat, add a little bit of weathering, and do all the final little bits like adding undercarriage and doors, etc. on the outside. And then I'll show some photos of it at the end, and that's it. That'll be the build series complete. So enjoy the video. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you want to. And thanks for watching. So first up for this video is the start of the decaling process. So my setup for this is, you can see at the top left there's a little decal warmer, which apparently can also be used for heating your coffee. That warms up a little pot of water, which will be used to soak the decals in. Cutting mat, good sharp blade, tweezers, and I use some brushes as well to apply microset, microsol, and UMP decal solutions. So you can see I'm just cutting out the specific decal I want. In this case, I'm going to apply one of the RAF roundels to the top surface. So we've got some microset. I'll apply the microset to where I want the decal to sit. So a microset is basically basically vinegar, which is slightly acidic, so it will probably act as a good cleaner for the surface, good degreaser. Will help the decal adhere to the surface. So this decal has been sat in the water for about 10 or 15 seconds in warm water, and it releases from the backing paper. So with my tweezers, I can just pick it up and place it exactly where I want it. Now, obviously, you need to be very careful using tweezers. Some people like to just slide the decal off the paper. I tend to find decal just using a pair of tweezers is often the easiest way to do it. So again, using a relatively dry brush, I'm just trying to squeeze out the excess moisture. So I'll be water around the micro set from beneath the decal to make sure it's got a good mating with the surface. And then I'll just use a little cotton bud just to burnish that down. Just roll it across. Make sure you're not going to move the decal. And that's pretty much it. That's getting it on the surface. I will come back and apply some microsol. That'll help soften the decal even more and help it conform into the panel line. In some cases with panel lines, you might need to actually a little bit later, once the decal has dried a little bit, slice it with a sharp blade along the panel line. But in this case, a little bit of microsol seems to pretty much do the job, softens it enough. Having not worked with Great Wall Hobbies before, the decals seem to react well to microset and sol. They also seem to react to the UMP normal reasonably well. So I've sped up the rest of this process. Everything is pretty much the same as the first decal I've shown. Soak the decals you want in warm water, using the microset on the surface, getting the decal in place, and then clearing out the excess, and then going back about 20-30 minutes later with the microsol. There's not a huge amount of decals on this aircraft. The kind of major notable ones are the kind of low visibility RAF roundels. There's a fin flash, and then there's these markings on the underside, which are to help aircraft form up for the refueling probes. And here I am applying the similar markings for the centerline refueling probe. So this helps the aircraft identify exactly where they are in relation to the refueling probe. So process continues with some of the safety markings up towards the cockpit end. There's also the nose art for this particular aircraft. We've got the fin flash, which will be either side of the fin. I like to do both kind of fin flashes at the same time so I can make sure I can get them lined up in pretty much exactly the same place. Same goes for serials on the aft fuselage and for any roundels that go on the aft section of the aircraft. I tend to line them up by eye, but I tend to do them at the same time so I can have that good kind of look. So now all the decal work is completed. There's just a small little bit of kind of detail painting which needs to be done. This is done freehand with a brush. So the next step is to get the wheels painted. So all the landing gear components were primed and sprayed on the sprue. I found they were so small it was going to be very hard to mount them for spraying once off the sprue. So I decided to do it on the sprue, and I'll fix up any of the sprue attachment points with a detail paintbrush a little bit later. So now that all that detail paint work and decals have been applied on the outside and given a good 12 hours at least to dry, probably actually 24 for the decals, it's time to give everything a clear coat to allow for any weathering. So in this case I'm using Vallejo's polyurethane satin varnish. I've generally had reasonably good results with this. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it's worked quite well for me. I tend to thin it about 50-50 with UMP thinner, and then build it up in basically a series of mist coats. It gives a little bit of protection for the decals. I've gone for satin because I'm going to use a water-based UMP washes, mainly to give more of kind of a staining effect. If I was going for a full kind of panel line wash, I would have gone for a gloss coat. And certainly if I was using enamel washes, I would have gone for certainly a more robust gloss coat, maybe something like aqua gloss. But in this case, the satin seems to work quite well. It gives a reasonable shine to the surface and should be sufficient protection to allow the weathering washes to go down and not damage any of the underlying paintwork or decal work. So I'm kind of working my way around the aircraft. Once that's had a chance to dry for 3 or 4 hours, I'll go back with another coat of the satin varnish for the underside. It's the same process. Generally build it up with mist coats. They'll dry pretty quickly, so you can go back over most areas. But obviously you need to avoid any kind of pooling or anything like that. If you do lay down relatively thick coats, I think it's recommended to leave for about 4 hours to come back then for a second coat. But for me, for what I was going to do with it, basically a series of quick mist coats gives enough of a kind of sheen to the surface to make it perfectly usable for the washes that are going to be applied. So again, I'm making sure I get all the kind of key angles in and around the underside fuel tanks, the refueling pods, in and around the kind of engine, undercarriage recesses, because all those areas will get a little bit of wash applied to them later. So once complete, this will be allowed probably a good 12 hours to dry before any further work is done. I'm just topping up the paint cup with the polyurethane satin varnish that's been thinned with UMP thinner. It makes it a very usable consistency for airbrushing. Just making sure I get all those kind of little crevices. Make sure the leading and trailing edges are protected as well. So that's had plenty of time to dry, but now it's time to come back and attend to the landing gear. So as I said, all of this was sprayed on the sprue. I'll come back and touch up the sprue attachment points after the cleanup is done. I'm going to start with the nose landing gear, which, despite consisting of in 144th scale, having 3 or 4 parts to each landing gear is some quite small components, but with Great Wall Hobbies, they're actually molded quite well and probably not as flimsy as I probably expected them to be for that complicated number of parts in this scale. So once again, it's the same process as the unpainted ones. Remove them from the sprue and then get in and clean up any sprue attachment points or seam lines. Certainly clean up any of the glue attachment points. But all of these kind of minor kind of sprue removal processes, that'll get all that kind of paint area will get touched up later with a detail paintbrush. Probably not the normal way that I do it. Normally I'd try and have everything removed and kind of mounted on a cocktail stick or a crocodile clip for spraying and painting, but given the size of these components, it seemed it was going to be difficult to find suitable attachment points. So now I'm just putting down a little piece of masking tape. I'm going to use that as basically a little palette for some CA glue, and I'll use the CA glue to assemble the landing gear. So in this case, I'm just using a kind of small tube of Loctite. I think it's Loctite super glue. I tend to find these small little tubes are quite useful because CA glue does go off after a while and doesn't adhere as well. So with the smaller bottles, I have plenty in stock and they stay sealed. So now I'm just attaching the little mud guard to the nose landing gear. The attachment point is very well molded. It's very, very good, clean attachment, and a little bit of CA glue just joins that together perfectly. Once again, I can only kind of commend how well this Great Wall Hobbies kit has gone together. For such small components, the attachment points on the landing gear were very well defined. Go together very, very well. Here I'm just attaching the 2 nose wheels. So both of those will need a little bit of a paint touch up a little bit later, as we've already said, because they were sprayed and painted on the sprue. So a little bit of CA glue is applied to the attachment points on the landing gear. I think I've dry fitted already, so it's quite a tight squeeze to get it in, but the landing gear does locate very, very well. Just decide basically to add another couple of drops of CA glue in the recesses in the landing gear bay. Just make sure that it sets rock hard and solid. So it's a little bit of a tight fit. Probably could have kind of scraped away some of the paint and I would have slotted in, but you can see I just used the back of a cocktail stick just to press those little locating points home. And that's it. And now I'll just speed up the rest of this process because it's pretty much the same. The main landing gear components, uh, sprue attachment points cleaned up, components attached together using CA glue again. I could start removing the massive number of wheels that we have for the main landing gear. It essentially consists of 8 wheels on each landing gear. So it's quite an amount of relatively tedious little work to basically get all these put together and ready to go on the main landing gear. But once again, the attachment points are clear. The alignment looks pretty good straight out of the box. So here I go back with a little bit of detail painting using Revell Black to just touch up those sprue attachment points, and go back and do the same for the nose gear. Now I go back with a little bit of Vallejo silver just to touch up any of the silver bits that got removed. Same process again, bit of CA glue to attach the main landing gear. I also take the opportunity now to attach the nose gear, main gear doors, and the air brakes. So just a little bit of CA glue on the locating points, and they sit in perfectly well. So it's now time to kind of clear down and get ready for a little bit of weathering. So I'm going to use UMP's light dirt. So when researching this aircraft and kind of looking at photos of it in service, the panel lines are not that obvious in photos. So the kit panel lines are well defined. So I don't think it needs a specific wash. I think it would be too much of a contrast to kind of show in this scale, in 144th scale. And also kind of looking at photos in terms of the kind of overall weathering. From distance, there's not a huge amount obvious. I think up close there obviously is, but given that this is a smaller scale, it was more a case of finding where the general areas of kind of weathering were, which seemed to be around the control surfaces. And that's kind of where I focus my attention on the top side. So I'm adding a little bit of UMP light dirt around the kind of major control surfaces on the wing. Just kind of placing it in the general areas where I want to see some, let's say, some staining more so than any kind of specific color change. So I'm just going around, just dabbing a little bit of the washing around, not putting too much on. Of course, even if you put a lot on it, it's relatively easy to remove because it's water-based. So now that that's had a little bit of a chance to dry, I've got a damp kitchen towel, some cotton buds, and a little tub of clean water as well. So just using a lightly moistened cotton bud, I'm just kind of wiping away the excess from the areas I need to remove it. Now I'm also going to go back and use a moist paintbrush as well to kind of reactivate the wash a little bit, just to get the little bit of kind of demarcation that I need, kind of want in these areas. Again, it's a very light and kind of subtle effect I'm aiming for. I'm just kind of wiping in the direction of airflow because that'll pretty much match where any kind of fluids would would have deposited on the surfaces or any dirt and grime. So you can see most of the wash is actually coming back off again, and generally it's just leaving behind a small bit of a stain in the area I kind of wanted to focus on. So I did find these UMP washes being water based. I kind of quite like that, particularly for this kind of staining type weathering. So for the rest of the top surface, I'm just going to speed through pretty much the same process that was done on the other wing, using damp cotton bud just to remove any excess wash that I want, just to leave a kind of staining effect. A little bit of wash was applied in around the air brakes and rudder as well. Again, exact same approach. Damp cotton bud just to remove whatever excess I wanted to remove. So on the underside, I've decided to use a little bit of dark dirt. I'm going to apply that around the kind of landing gear areas, or after the landing gear areas, after the refueling areas, the refuel center refuel probe. So I'm just dabbing on a little bit of the UMP dark wash, just to add a little bit of variation to that. I'm going back with a little bit of UMP earth, just to dab in a little bit of that to mix it in. So when I kind of remove it and streak it back, there'll be kind of elements of kind of both colors mixed together. So go back to the UMP dark dirt again, just to do the wing refueling locations. And from the pictures I've seen in and around this engine area, where those what look like engine kind of auxiliary intakes, there's a lot of staining visible in the photos I've seen. So that's the one area that I did really want to kind of stand out and highlight through the weathering process. Again, it didn't need to be excessive, but with the water-based washes, it's easy enough to apply quite a bit and then remove as much or all of it if necessary, if you're not happy with it. So once that's had a chance to dry, same process with a wet, damp cotton bud. Go back to remove the excess. I did then find that just kind of removing with the wet paper towel was actually quite effective in getting just that subtle amount of kind of staining in the areas that I wanted. So you can see almost, a huge amount of the wash has come back off again. But that's kind of exactly what I wanted. I just wanted a certain amount of staining in certain areas. So at this point, I did decide that actually I wasn't going to give another clear coat. I was kind of happy with the satin finish that I'd gotten from the pre-weathering coat. There's not a huge amount of weathering that was done on it, and I'm pretty much happy with the results. So I decided now is basically finished. It's time to remove the masks from the canopy because there's no more clear coats going on. So these are very, very carefully removed with a scalpel blade and a pair of tweezers. So just using the scalpel just to grab the edge and then use the tweezers if necessary to pull away a little bit of masking tape. So I'll just speed it up a little bit just to get through this phase. And that is it. That's the Victor complete. So let's go and have a look at some of the photos of the finished model. So as the model was actually still quite big, it didn't fit very well in my photo booth. So I've just used a piece of black cloth as a backdrop. I have to say I'm very pleased with the kit and the finish. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe, please like, leave a comment, and I'll answer any comments. So thanks for watching.